All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Leo Bletnitsky with Healthy Technology Solutions, and I'm joined by Diego Trujillo from Las Vegas Heals. He's the CEO, and we're here to talk cybersecurity and some of the things that have been going on in the Las Vegas community. So we're going to start it off. Diego, do you want to really quickly kind of do a little bio about yourself and what you do?
Hello, everybody. My name is Diego Trujillo. I'm the CEO of Las Vegas Heals. We are a trade organization that looks to bring together the different leadership at healthcare companies throughout the Las Vegas Valley. We work to improve the healthcare system here in Southern Nevada. In addition to that, I'm also the founder and president of a group called Vegas Healthcare, which was the original group that I had started founding and leading. And the purpose and the aim of that group was to bring together the healthcare community, which we've unified with Las Vegas Heals and bringing together the voice of healthcare in Southern Nevada to be able to help us share information, prevention, different things that are happening in our community so that we can get representation here in Southern Nevada and help to advance healthcare here in Southern Nevada. So it's a pleasure to be with everybody today.
All right, thank you, Diego, and I'm Leo Bletnitsky, President and CEO of Healthy Technology Solutions. We're an IT solution provider focused on healthcare and business technology in Southern Nevada and Central Florida. So we're going to talk a little about some definitions, a little bit about what's going on in the community, and what every business really should be doing, whether you're in healthcare or construction or you're a law firm. What everyone should be doing in order to protect themselves, at least at a bare minimum. So before we start off, I wanted to really quickly, this is my favorite slide. Actually, no, this is not my favorite slide. This is actually a sad slide. This is for those that think that they're not subject to some of these issues that they're hearing in the news, there's a lot in our community that have happened just recently. Everything from the MGM attack that everybody knows about, shut down the casino for a while. Caesars also was attacked. It says here that MGM lost about $100 million, which is more than I have in my pocket right now. It's actually 110 million, which is the last statistic I saw. But even small organizations like Hankin and Sohn's plastic surgery, they were compromised and they're currently being sued because their patient private information, private photos, sensitive photos were leaked, and even patients were ransomed. But this is my favorite. This is my favorite slide. This was a real job offer on the dark web. This is from a couple of years ago. I haven't found anything better than this, but this is only $63,000 a month starting salary. Eventually, after you prove yourself, after 2 years, your salary will be a little over $1 million. So there's a ton of people out there that are doing bad things, and some of those bad things really affect us. Here's another little slide that shows on the lower end what you can get someone to do on the dark web. Everything from hacking cell phones, and Diego's got a story about that, and to email hacking, changing grades in school. And it's in the hundreds or a few $1,000s. You can hire someone to do those types of things for you. So with that being said, Diego, you want to really quickly talk about your story.
That's so funny. Yeah.
And then maybe after that, I know that you talked to a lot of healthcare executives, and maybe talk about how the Change Healthcare compromise has affected some of the practices that you interact with.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pleasure to be able to speak to everyone today. Leo had spoken to me, and I'll give a little bit of background just so everyone knows when I had taken over Las Vegas Heals. We were trying to get everything started. Leo approached me and he said, "Hey, I'd love to sit down and talk to you about starting a task force for technology." Well, in that case, was for cybersecurity. And so I was like, "Yeah, let's sit down and have a conversation." In my mind, a lot of people ask for appointments and meetings, and I was like, "Well, of course, this guy has a hammer, so everything is a nail." And so in the back of my mind, we sit down at lunch and we kind of talk about cybersecurity, the importance of cybersecurity. I've been aware. I've been building my own computer since I was a kid, so I'm somewhat aware, and I don't use antivirus. I never have because I was somewhat literate as to, yeah, don't click on links, don't go to these websites, etc. So I always felt kind of secure in myself and having that ability. and I think it was the day before or 2 days before me and Leo were going to sit down and have lunch and discuss what was going on with technology. It just so happened there was a venture I was involved in, and my cell phone one day all of a sudden stopped working. It's kind of odd. I was at home. It was about I want to say 8:39 in the morning. And the other thing is I got like three or four kind of like weird texts, like when you sign up for a survey, stop here. So I just got some like weird links and I was like, huh. And then my cell phone stopped working. So I was like, all right. I sat working at my house. I was like, I'm going to be here a couple more hours and then I'm going to head out. And I'm going to head out. I'll swing by T-Mobile and just let them know my cell phone service is now working. I have Wi-Fi. I'll be fine. So I drive over to T-Mobile after a couple of hours. I swing by. They go, oh, yeah, seems there's a problem here. Let's see. Okay, we're going to put a new SIM. Okay, perfect. Everything's good to go. They got my cell phone service going. I was happy as a clam. I got back to my day and getting to work on what I had to do. Well, sure enough, at around 3 p.m. that afternoon, I got a call from one of my partners, and she placed a phone call. I was in an important meeting, so I sent it to voicemail. Um, Immediately called me right back. And for me, it's kind of like, hey, nothing's that important. Why are you calling me right after? I couldn't talk to you 2 seconds ago. Why are you calling me again? And sure enough, I sent it to voicemail again. And then I see a little text message pop up and say, hey, did you just wire $36,000 out of the bank account? And at that point, I was like, excuse me 1 second. I stepped out immediately out of the meeting. Immediately upon stepping out of the meeting, I called her and I was like, hey, what are you talking about? No, I didn't. She goes, oh my God, dude, somebody wired money out of the account, blah, blah, blah. It's going to some bank in Arizona to a PNC account, etc. She goes, it's been 10 minutes. I'm going to call the bank. I'm going to let them know that this was a fraudulent charge. Do not authorize this, etc. She immediately got on top of it. We end up getting a call the next day. And this is through Chase, right? So we're not talking about a small local regional bank. This is, one of the things that I always loved about Chase was their technology. They had very, very good applications for the phone. And so immediately I thought, you know what? It was a fraud. It's no big deal. They could see and track that it wasn't us. Not a problem at all. And so at that point, I was like, we'll have this resolved in a few days. We just need to let them know, hey, we reported it within 10 minutes. Sure enough, they get back to us and they say, hey, unfortunately, the money wasn't recovered. We're going to have to start going through some processes. And the interesting thing part about this is it was a new partnership that had been formed. All three of us had kind of just met each other and, we felt good about the project. And all of a sudden during the conversation, they do this long interview for me. And at the very end of the conversation, they say, hey, we also asked, do not talk to your partners about this. I was like, oh, okay, so we shouldn't. And they go, yes, a lot of times partners will do this and hide it from the other partner, etc. They go, please don't discuss until we finalize the investigation. And I told them, well, hold on, but you're making it sound like it was one of the partners, like there was a suspicion around the partners. Well, sure enough, they get back to me and they go, and I told them, I was like, it was from my account, If you're telling this to all the partners, I'm looking like the guilty party here. And so immediately, right, I'm just like, oh God, this is a very uncomfortable spot to be in. Sure enough, we probably went through a 3-month battle where they denied the claim 3 times. It kept having to get escalated. I was going through this nightmare scenario. The money was in this account because we had to pay a contractor. We had not touched it for 6 months. And 3 days before, we had to pay the contractor. What ended up happening, I found out, is called SIM swapping, because I called T-Mobile to find out. They were tight-lipped. The minute a fraud happens, they're like, well, you got to talk to the fraud department. You got to talk to a fraud department. I said, yeah, but how did they access? We can't talk about how they access the account. Was it a person in a store? Was it a call center, right? Was it social engineering? And that's when I found out about SIM swapping. Basically, what they had done was either an employee at T-Mobile, somebody swapped the SIM over from my phone to another phone, let's say in Seattle. As soon as they swapped it over, they had also tracked my information. As soon as they swapped the phone over, they tried to log into the Chase account. It asked for a verification code, which went to the phone in Seattle. This was all going on while I'm sitting at home thinking, oh, I'll just finish up my work. Sure enough, they got the code, and then that's how they managed to pull this off. They did fraud on a few different accounts. It just so happened that all the accounts were logged into my username and password. It ended up being a 3-month nightmare. Luckily, there was one person that really was like, hey, I can see that the 4 things that you reported as fraud were all from a different IP that you've never used to access the account. And luckily, thanks to this woman, she goes, they keep denying the claim. I'm going to push really hard. And they were able to reimburse the money. It was unbelievable, the headache and the nightmare. The fact that the banking, I was completely left hung out to dry. They said, well, why didn't you report the fraud sooner? We reported it within 10 minutes. Well, why didn't you file a police report? Because you never told us to file. The 4 things you guys told us to do, we did all 4 of them within 45 minutes. And it was just a pretext. It was a nonstop nightmare for a few months, just trying to figure out, on top of the kind of distrust between partners, what's going on, et cetera. How are we going through this mess? And it could have really been a make it or break it moment for us. Luckily, one of the partners said, hey, I'll cover in the meantime while we see if we can get the money back. Luckily, we were able to recover the funds, but it really drew light. Like this whole nightmare started for me 2 days. So 2 days later, I sit down with Leo and he goes, hey, I think cybersecurity is a problem, and it needs to be brought to the forefront. I was like, yes, absolutely. And I fill him in on this entire story that's happening to me. And he goes, that's what I'm talking about. I think, and this was a few years back. I mean, we've looked at the increase. I speak with business owners all the time. We see it. There's a plastic surgery office here in town, which is very unfortunate. And Leo could probably go more into the details of what happened there, but we saw where the patient information was compromised. They even got access to the before and after pictures and then started blackmailing all of the individuals. And I only know this because I did a podcast episode with Leo. They started blackmailing the individual patients of the practice. I mean, the egg on the face of these surgeons, and it was unfortunate. I spoke with a friend and they're like, man, they're wonderful plastic surgeons. And I realized in that moment how you could go to school for 8 years, you can get your specialization, you could spend years rebuilding your reputation or building your reputation and getting a name for yourself. And for something that has nothing to do with plastic surgery, end up looking like an absolute fool. It really harks to the point that this is something we need to pay attention to. And as Leo explained in the podcast interview I did with him, it's only something we're going to see increase. I don't think people are aware at how readily available and easy this stuff is.
Absolutely.
And so Leo was like, I don't know if you want to share. I was like, absolutely. I gladly share my story because it happened to me. And I've never had an issue with any type of hacking, with any other issues since I've been using a computer at 14, 15 years old. Never had been a problem until it became a problem. And at that point, there was nothing I could do. It was an absolute nightmare. Also, if I can throw out a suggestion, Leo, for everyone, if you just call your phone company and say, lock my SIM, then you physically have to go into a store to transfer the SIM card. So that's something I tell everyone after that is just call them and tell them to lock your SIM. Otherwise, someone can log in. If they get your username and password on the website, they can log in and swap the SIM and do the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a problem. The only problem with locking it is if you're traveling internationally and you have a problem with your phone. Like my son went scuba diving with his iPhone and didn't realize until he was about 50 feet down. We were in Mexico and we could not get it. Actually, even though ours is not locked, we still couldn't get any help. That's a whole nother story.
Now he has a Telcel number.
Yeah, nightmare scenario. But no, thank you, Diego, for that. That is something that's happening a lot more. Luckily, within our client base, we've only had one incident of like ransomware or like a major incident, but it was for a much larger company that it's in a co-managed. They have an IT department, and we got a call that says, "Oh, we screwed up." And not we, my staff, but the IT department made some errors, and it cost them about $1.5 million. They're not big enough to lose 100 million like MGM. But again, it's very, very painful. If you have 300 employees, $1.5 million might be survivable, but it is extremely painful and it's an extremely long, long road. Before we go any further with this, real quickly, Diego, have you heard any kind of blowback from the community about what's happened with the compromise with Change Healthcare?
Well, I think unfortunately, when you look at healthcare, and this is something we've been talking about with many things, not just on change.com, but the way that we structure our systems in general, right? And this discussion I was having with someone from KPGM, if I'm not butchering that. And as I was speaking with him from KPGM, he goes, a lot of times we don't kind of realize our infrastructure and how delicately balanced our entire society is. He was telling me there's going to be blowback to systems, hospital systems, for at least a year. They're getting calls from large healthcare systems saying, how do we delay paying our vendors? We can't afford to pay our vendors. This is going to throw us off completely. And we really got to talking it. Again, it's in Spanish, we have a saying, it's the foxes that spoil the vineyard. I'm pretty sure it's in English as well. But the foxes that spoil the vineyard. As you're building a healthcare company, it's not that the last thing on your mind. Obviously, we all have an idea of HIPAA compliance and those things because the government forces us to know. But it reminds me a lot of when I was like 18 years old, and I was like 17 when I got my first car, and I got car insurance. My father worked at MetLife, so I was only looking at what the price was every month, and I was basing it solely on that. My father worked in insurance for many years, and he looked at my policy one day and he goes, "Son, this is terrible. Like, do you realize? Yes, you are technically okay to legally drive. Do you realize what a horrible position you could put yourself in?" Right? He had more experience. He had seen more. And then the same thing. Sometimes we think about IT and infrastructure, and we think, well, good enough might be good enough. And this is one of those things that could really ruin everything. With change.com, the blowback will be felt out through our healthcare system over the next year. And these compromises, unfortunately, with change, we somehow built a system, a healthcare system here where 60% of payments flow through one place. So it really, for no fault of their own, all the companies down at the bottom, a lot of them are getting screwed over, getting delayed payments, not being able to receive funding. All of these problems happen because we're not careful on to how we build our house, on what our reserves and what our systems are. And one of the things that I really like about what Leo does, not just as a member of HEALD, but even in the things that we do with the healthcare technology, is looking to build things thoughtfully and not just assembling them to be able to move forward. And a lot of us in healthcare have that idea of, okay, how do I continue pushing, without thinking that one of the legs on the table might be a little loose. One soft kick and everything can come crumbling down.
Absolutely. So, it all comes down to, it's like, what is cybersecurity? It's really maintaining, it's not just cybersecurity. What is security and what is data integrity? It's that what they call CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility. If one of those things fails, you don't know, is the data valid? And in healthcare, even something as simple as removing allergies from primary care patients, you can end up, if someone compromises a system and just removes, it's not even going to be noticeable, just because they want to be malicious, and just removes allergies. Suddenly, the next time Mrs. Smith comes in, she's going to be, prescribed antibiotics that may kill her. That would put her into anaphylactic shock. I mean, medical errors happen, but when they're forced by a third party, that's a problem. Or you just can't see the patient because you don't have access to their chart. And as in a primary care, you cannot prescribe anything to somebody unless you have access to that chart, because you can't rely on the patient to tell you what their allergies are, what other medications they're taking from other providers. So that's a serious problem. But yeah, so it's really the process of protecting electronic information, and from unauthorized access, disclosure, disruption, modification, or destruction. And that's especially in healthcare, but in legal and construction. I mean, again, if someone makes changes and that bridge collapses, we see what happened in Maryland, obviously unrelated to cyber, but every little thing, it can cause major, major ramifications. So here's just kind of a list of some of the recent breaches here in Southern Nevada. And I'm going to do, I probably should have pulled one up for our Florida folks, but this was easy, and I'm sitting here in Vegas right now. Change Healthcare is kind of at the, is the most recent major one, but MGM, Hankins and Sones, it may not be a major one. It's major to them, and it's major to the patients whose nude pictures ended up online. UMC has had a couple of breaches over the years, which is Common Spirit Health, Neurology Center of Nevada. That was a couple of years ago. Again, another UMC, Tesla last year, Southern Nevada Health District, a couple of years ago, and Clark County School District. So it really doesn't matter what business you're in, everybody is at risk. And what are the typical types of?
I'll chime in real quick,
Yeah,
Leo.
absolutely.
When I was working in a hospice here locally, for those that don't know, I started as a hospice chaplain. I worked in marketing. I still also remember the marketing meeting we had to have one morning. Hey guys, we need to get ahead of this. We're going to have to publish something in the review journal saying that all of our patient records have been compromised. They're all out there. And we had to go account, as marketers, we had to go account by account saying, hey, we had an intrusion. They looked up patient records, and have to kind of save face in the community on a constant basis, which is very embarrassing when you're going through that situation. I didn't feel embarrassed because I wasn't in charge of that, but yeah, it's something I saw, even a small hospice company that only had about 150 patients at the time.
Absolutely. So, what are the types of cybersecurity threats? The most common one is business email compromise. How many people have received an email from somebody, and it says, "Hey, can you take a look at this invoice and see why you haven't paid it?" And then you're thinking, "Wait a second, you know, they pay us, we don't pay them. Why are we getting an invoice for them?" And it turns out to be, you click on it, it wants your password information. That is almost all breaches, almost all ransomware events start with business email compromise, or phishing, and it's typically a combination of both. Ransomware, that's, it's deployed by email, it's deployed through phishing, it's deployed through compromised websites. There's malware attacks, there's password attacks where they try to get your password or brute force your password. And then there's insider threats, which a lot of people don't think about, is their own staff, whether maliciously or not, decide to cause problems for the organization. And then now with artificial intelligence, there's a lot more opportunity for that to happen because of someone faking the voice. If you take a couple of voicemail recordings of anybody, upload it into an AI engine, you can have that person say absolutely anything you want, and soon you'll be able to have them say anything you want on video. And then there's social engineering, which isn't on this list, but because it's not really cyber, but it can be used in cyber, pretending to be someone you're not. MGM, my understanding, it was a combination ransomware and social engineering to get access. So what's business email compromise? Again, a large percentage of all compromises start with that. Um, you know, they impersonate somebody, whether they're sending an email as the CEO's email gets breached. They're sending an email from that CEO's account saying, "Hey, CFO, I need you to wire $200,000 to this vendor that I just made a deal with. The only way we get this pricing if it's done in the next 2 hours. I'm hopping on an airplane. Let me know it's done." And unless you have the proper controls within your organization to go, wait a second, that's not how we do things. We need to, it needs to be verbal. I need a PO. I need, something. Um, then, once that money gets wired, if you don't get to it, if it's being wired internationally, you actually have more chance of getting it recovered. But if you're wiring it domestically, as soon as you wire domestically, it's getting moved to 5 different accounts, and no one can help. The police can't help you. FBI can potentially, but only if it's within the first really 24 hours for domestic and within 72 hours for international. And again, if it's $20,000, FBI will not help because they're really only going after stuff that's over 100 grand or terrorism. Phishing attacks. I mean, I get 20 a day. Most of them are caught by the spam filter. But again, you click on a link, it looks completely legitimate. I even got tricked once. I almost entered credentials. It was American Express. And it looked perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And then the website we were redirected to also looked pretty much perfect. So it's really a matter of, look at the URL. If you're going to, American Express, if you're going to wellsfargo.com, let's say, make sure that it actually says wellsfargo.com in the in the URL in the browser. Don't search for links, or don't search for websites. If you know the website address, type the whole website address in. Don't search for it. There's too much chance when you're busy of clicking on something because someone put up a fake site. Ransomware attacks. This is really where most folks are it's publicized. This is really locks up your files. And it's really double ransom now. It used to be that if you had a good backup, you could, give the ransomware actors a finger and not pay them and not worry about it. Well, now before they actually encrypt any of your files, they actually exfiltrate those files to the web, to storage, so they have access, and then they can parse through those files and see what's useful. So if you don't pay them, they then say, "Hey, we're gonna release all of your financial data. We're gonna social security numbers of your employees. All that stuff is gonna now be sold." And going to be published on the web. So not only is it embarrassing, but now you have to pay for identity theft protection, and there could be a lot of other embarrassing things like if suddenly everyone's salary gets publicized. Um, it's a bad day for a typical company. Malware attacks, a lot of this is just disruptive and damaging. They'll delete your data. They'll, cause your systems to do weird things, change your data, or they exfiltrate the data, encrypt the data, and then after the fact, they may or may not, you may or may not get your data back. So again, having good malware protection is critical, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Password attacks. So this is something that every single company almost that I visit is vulnerable to this. They are reusing passwords. They're using the same password for 10 different accounts. All their banking, their Amazon account, their Yahoo account, and their business email. The problem is if any one of those vendors or companies gets compromised and those passwords get stolen, they then take because they know your first and last name, it's an automated system. They will then try that password with variations of your first and last name, and your email address on every single customary site. Whether they'll try every bank, they'll try every Amazon, eBay, PayPal, all of those until to see if you're reusing those passwords. And most of the time, the passwords are also silly. Password 123 exclamation mark with a capital P is not a secure password, no matter what anyone has ever told you. So we really strongly recommend, everyone has to have strong passwords. And by strong passwords, I mean passwords that people can't remember. So and then also multi-factor authentication is critical, even though that's now circumventable pretty easily. And you have to train the employees not to reuse passwords or share them. Insider threats, we touched on that briefly. Someone within the organization that is unhappy about something or just accidentally does something that can cause a problem. So best practices, what does everyone have to do? And this isn't optional. This isn't a, hey, it'd be nice. If you don't do this, you're pretty much leaving the front door of your house open in a bad neighborhood. It's just not a good idea. You have to have policies and procedures. You have to have regular risk assessments, checking where are you vulnerable. You have to train employees on cybersecurity awareness. And at the end, if anyone that attends this that sends me an email, we will set up a free cybersecurity training, a cybersecurity awareness training login for you and your employees. So however many people in the organization will provide at least that initial training. It's a portal. It takes about 40 minutes for an employee to go through that. You got to patch the operating systems. Most malware and most compromised websites exploit exploit things that have been patched months or years ago. We still walk in and we see Windows XP. That's been end of life and a HIPAA violation for a number of years now, and we still see it. If things are patched, then you're a lot more secure. If you click on a link and the site's compromised, if you're patched, you're probably going to be okay potentially. If you're not patched, there's so many ways in. It's again, you're leaving the front door open and maybe even the back door. Multi-factor authentication. If you're familiar with when you log into your bank, they text you. Ideally, and Chase, by the way, still doesn't support a multi-factor app. Right now, Chase is still just doing text, and text messaging is better. A text code is better than no code, but using a authenticator app is much more secure. So, both for work and any system that will support it, I strongly recommend that everyone use a proper multi-factor authentication app, whether it's Microsoft Authenticator or Google or Duo. There's a bunch of different solutions out there. Encrypt sensitive data on all storage devices. There's no legitimate reason for laptops and computers within any organization, let alone healthcare, for the hard drives to not be encrypted. If you have proper systems, it's free. It doesn't cost anything more if you have the business versions of the operating systems. It's just a matter of being able to manage those keys. So that way, if your laptop's stolen, it doesn't matter how much data is on it, no one can access it. Also, only send PII via encrypted email. I see so many organizations, both legal offices sending things to the court, doctors and billers sending things to insurance company for or to other providers for referrals, just using Gmail accounts. It's susie.practicename@gmail.com. Separate from being a HIPAA violation, you're completely sending it insecurely on an insecure platform. So use encrypted email, whether it's Microsoft 365 or Google G Suite. Use a password manager because no normal person can remember all the passwords and can remember 100 different passwords for 100 different sites. So if you use a password manager, you only have to remember one secure password, and the password manager creates passwords and manages passwords for everything else. And then back up your data regularly. Just in the last month, I visited three organizations that didn't have backup set up. Their last backup was in like 2022. And I asked, I said, "Hey, are you paying for backup?" And their answer was, "Well, no, but shouldn't they be doing it anyway?" Well, no one does anything for free. And even if you're paying for it, it's a good idea to check, is the backup actually going? Because, you lose your patient data, that's a HIPAA violation. You lose, if you're an auto mechanic shop and you lose, the QuickBooks that tells you who owes you money, you're probably going to go out of business because you have no idea. So we won't spend a ton of time on each one of these, but policies and procedures, you have to have a policy, just like for HIPAA, you have to have a policy. You have to have a policy and procedure for cybersecurity. What are people allowed to do at the office on the company-owned computers? Do you allow personal computers in the office? Those types of things. Define roles and responsibilities. Who's responsible if something comes up? If no one in the office knows who's responsible, then no one's responsible. And then and then if there's an incident, who do you call? What do you do? Do you unplug everything? Do you just go about your day and hope that it'll be okay and deal with it tomorrow? Probably not a good idea. Again, the risk assessment you really should be done at least annually. What is on the network? What devices are not patched? What screw up has been made in the firewall? Those types of things. It's really really important. And also looking at what programs are installed that maybe are coming from countries that are not friendly to the United States and potentially could cause problems. So I wouldn't use any software written in Russia or China or Iran if possible. And there's a lot of applications. We have a program that tells us where our clients' software is written, and it's kind of eye-opening. And we have to have the conversation. Hey, do you really need this widget that I've never heard of that was made in China? The answer is probably not. Again, training. This is something that even some Fortune 1000 companies just don't properly do. They don't train employees regularly on how to identify problems. That whole if it just don't look right, JDLR. It's kind of a law enforcement term, but it's also you know pretty pertinent in really anything we're talking about. If it doesn't look right, it probably isn't. You want to do ongoing cybersecurity awareness training, how to spot a phishing email, how to know if a link that you're clicking on is not legitimate, how to know that the boss didn't just email you from a iCloud account asking you to buy some Target gift cards or iTunes gift cards. And then also phishing simulation training, not training, but tests to employees. So for a lot of our clients that are signed up, we actually send phishing emails to all of their staff and then report back on who clicked on them and who actually entered their usernames and passwords. And that way we can then do a little bit more training and it helps to protect organizations. But this probably is one of the most important. It's like backup, good anti-malware software and employee training are really the three most important parts of cybersecurity. Again, multi-factor authentication. Use an authenticator app for anything you can. It's not 100% effective because if you click on a link now, there are certain vulnerabilities that let people steal what's called a session token, and then they can actually, without having to um, steal your password, and that completely bypasses multi-factor authentication. They're able to steal the token, insert it into their browser, and now they're in as you. And that's where having a system that will lock out the accounts for what's called impossible travel are really important. So, perfect example, I was on a cruise last year at the end of the year in the Mediterranean, and I connected to the ship's Wi-Fi, and then I used a VPN, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, which gets me back to the United States and protects me from unsecured Wi-Fi's. Well, our system immediately locked me out because it showed that one, I was connected in the Mediterranean, somewhere in Europe. Then it had me connecting out of, I think it was California, or because it goes through California, and that's impossible. You can't be in the Mediterranean and in California simultaneously. So it locked out my account. And completely legit. We had to actually put an exception for me for that particular time period for that locale, and I was able to work. But again, if someone logs into your email from Vegas and from New York, again, that's impossible travel. So there should be a mechanism that would automatically block that. Endpoint detection and response. So most people talk about, oh, I've got antivirus software. And by the way, when we walk and we do assessments on a lot of offices, healthcare and legal and construction, a lot of the different industries, we check, and it turns out that they have antivirus, but it's the free antivirus that came with the computers, and after 90 days it expires, and so it's no protection at all. And on top of that, antivirus software is pretty much useless now. You really have to have managed detection and response, and then this enterprise endpoint detection and response solutions that do a lot more. They're using AI to look at is the behavior of this software correct, or is there a problem? Is there malicious code in here? And it's actually looking at that real time. Most antivirus softwares, they have signatures, and all the bad guys have to do is just slightly change it and put it out into the wild. And again, the software becomes useless. So you have to have these higher end solutions that are managed, and typically that will have a security operations center behind it. So a third party company that actually is looking at the logs, and they have AI and humans that will actually flag things and say, okay, this doesn't look right. This person logged in, and they're doing things that that's not normal for the organization, and they can actually shut down those accounts or disconnect the computers. So without that, just your regular, plain old Norton antivirus is it's completely useless. Again, encryption. Every hard drive, every computer should be encrypted. There's no reason that, absolutely no reason, especially because in most cases it's free. You just have to do it and manage it. Um, email encryption. Again, use email encryption. Don't send, Excel spreadsheets with patient social security numbers and diagnoses, or ICD codes to anybody without encrypted email. And a lot of the hospitals and a lot of the payers are, going to push back on encryption. They should know better, but they just don't care. So each individual practice, each individual entity needs to care for themselves, because when you get compromised, or if your patient data gets compromised, no one's going to care that the other end didn't want it. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't really know about. So when you connect, when you're at the airport and you do a little work and you connect to the airport Wi-Fi, do you really know it's the airport Wi-Fi? Or is it somebody else that's there that named what they call a pineapple? It could be in their suitcase, in their backpack, just a little device that acts like a wireless access point that connects to the airport's Wi-Fi, and then starts advertising itself as the same name as the airport Wi-Fi, providing free access. When you connect, they're able to see every password, everything that you type, and every site you go to. They're able to see everything that kind of goes through that device. So to prevent that, you want to use a VPN product that encrypts the data on your device and sends it out through that third party. And then there are now more advanced versions of that will allow you to connect to directly into your office, without using the regular VPN that people are used to VPN clients or site-to-site VPN. Um, this would be more what they call zero trust. And zero trust is an important concept that you're going to hear a lot more about in the upcoming months and years, because you literally can't trust anybody. You can't trust any software. You can't trust any networks you're on. And so in a zero trust framework, every computer that you're supposed to have access to is also going to have that zero trust client, and it will not allow someone to connect to it that is not part of that network and that has not specifically been allowed to connect. So, in a large organization, you have a couple hundred people. You have people in accounting, you have people in management, you have people in logistics, in sales. There's no reason for sales people to, even if they don't have passwords that get them into the accounting systems, they shouldn't even be able to see the accounting systems or to try to log into them. So that's what zero trust does. It prevents people from talking to devices that they're not allowed to talk to. And then password manager. So if you look at this, um, oh, if you look at this password at the very bottom, that's just a typical password that my password manager will create. It's physically impossible for a normal human to remember this. But if I've got 100 different sites that I log into, and every single one of them has a crazy password like that. It's all managed by that password manager. It's encrypted with my one password that I have to remember. So I only have really one password that I remember that then gives me access to all my other passwords. It's strongly recommended. And one of the things that the password manager does is lets you share passwords. So if you have, let's say in healthcare, you have the billing department. They all have to be able to log into various payer portals, and a lot of the payer portals only give you one account that's being shared. Well, when Susie, logs in, it says time to change your password, and she does. She writes it down, which is also insecure, and then goes to lunch. Now Bob wants to log into that same payer, password doesn't work, and he could reset the password, but then that multi-factor or that password reset email is going to go to a manager who's on vacation. So now you have to wait until this person gets home, gets back to the office in order to be able to log into that payer site. In a shared environment, you can actually say the billing group has access to these passwords, and when somebody changes it, it changes it across the board for everybody, and everyone now has access to it. So there's a lot of benefits in addition to being able to store lots of different secure passwords. Backup and disaster recovery, you have to have good backup. We try to back up every one of our clients that has servers on an hourly basis if possible. If they're really, really large and the backup takes a little bit longer or slows the systems down, then we typically do it 3 times a day: morning, lunchtime when it's a little bit slower, and at the end of the day. That way you have recovery points, because losing a day's worth of work is unacceptable in my mind. And also your own computer. Everyone has OneDrive or Drive or Dropbox. Keep your important files in something that's both local and backed up to the cloud, so you don't lose data. And I briefly touched on the zero trust. There's two different types of zero trust. There's network zero trust, where you can't talk to another device unless you've been specifically approved. And then there's application zero trust, which means that you can't install anything on your computer or run anything on your computer that hasn't been approved. So if you click on a malicious site and that site tries to download and run some kind of either memory exploit or tries to run something, that thing that no one knows about, it's not on a list of unapproved items, but it's not on a list of approved items, which means it can't run. So that, if you do a zero trust framework with some of those other things, you are much less likely to ever get compromised. And that is something that, we're really starting to push folks to. And there's a cost. That's not free. And there's a number of companies that are involved in that industry. But the whole criminal business model has been commoditized. You can now hire people, ransomware as a service, or hacking as a service, like I showed earlier. Anything that you want done, you don't have to be technical. So if Diego wanted to send out ransomware to everybody and make a little money on the side, he can hire someone on the dark web, and they will actually write some ransomware for him, tell him how to deploy it, and then they'll have a revenue share. He'll get 75%, the bad guy will get 25%, everyone wins, except for everyone that Diego sends it to, right?
Where would I find this, Leo, just so I can avoid it?
Well, no, you can't accidentally stumble onto the dark web, but if you know where to go, if you can Google how to get on the dark web. It requires an Onion browser or Tor browser, and you can hire people to do just about anything. They sell lists of companies that pay ransom. So if you get ransomed and you pay it, you're much more likely to get ransomed than somebody that has not paid the ransom or been subject to ransomware. So this is kind of like, if you it's one of the reasons that the U.S. government has they're not going to negotiate with terrorists policies, because if you negotiate with terrorists, then it encourages terrorists to kidnap people and do whatever it is that they do. So the more that you allow the criminals, to be rewarded by their bad deeds, you're just going to, create more of it. That's why retail theft is so rampant nationwide, because no one gets in trouble for it, and they're getting rewarded. They're making a ton of money, and they never go to jail. Um, social engineering is again going to become more and more of a problem because of artificial intelligence. Very, very soon you'll be able to, probably download a free app to be able to, take a video of somebody and then, remaster that video to say and do anything you want. It's going to get really, really scary for both criminal proceedings, for, surveillance footage, because no matter what you see, you're not going to necessarily know that you can believe it. So that they keep talking about false information or fake news. It's gonna be a ton of fake news. Right now, half the fake news is actually true. Uh, Turns out to be true, but you're gonna not be able to trust anything. There's credential stuffing. Like I talked about, what ends up happening if you reuse your password, they try that same password on every other system they can, that's commercially available. Contaminated emails with bad attachments, with infected attachments, trying to harvest your passwords. There's so many different things that you can accidentally click on or accidentally download. And there's Diego's favorite, SIM card fraud. Um, so the main thing, again, different password for every single site or service. It's mandatory, but the only way to do that is to have a password manager, because no one's capable of remembering all those passwords. MFA, multi-factor authentication, security awareness training for everybody. Don't search for known websites. So if it's wellsfargo.com, don't search for Wells space Fargo. Just type wellsfargo.com in the browser as opposed to in the search bar. Don't click on links without verifying where they go. When you hover over a link, it tells you where it's pointing to. Read where it's pointing to. Don't click on it just because. Don't share passwords with others. A lot of people have family passwords, or they have, they share passwords. Oh, I use, Bob's password to log on to his computer when my computer has a problem. Well, that's a serious problem, because now you have two different individuals that can lose your password. Use VPNs, update Windows and other software, and good, malware and they call EDR software. And that's really it. I mean, I don't want this to be a commercial about Healthy Technology Solutions, but this is kind of what we do. Kind of proactive approach to managing IT and clients. And that's really the final slide there. So if the organization wants to have a complimentary security awareness training account for their organization, just email either myself at leob@htsfast.com or info@htsfast.com, and we'll get you set up. And we're doing this because we feel it's important enough that everybody should at least have a base level of security awareness training, because it makes everybody better. And as a community, we don't want to see in the news that people we know and like are having financial problems or legal problems because of compromises, or because of data loss, or because somebody accidentally clicked on something they weren't supposed to. So now, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat, and we'll answer any questions that come up. And Diego, anything you want to throw in?
Now, I do have to sign off because I have a commencement for a nursing school right now, but I wanted to thank everyone for their attention, for taking the time to jump on. I think what Leo's reviewing is incredibly important.
Thank you, Diego. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much for your time. Be well.
So Mario asking, how do you prevent SIM swap, or is it just bad luck? So the way to prevent it, one, is you can call your your cellular provider and ask to have your account either locked or have a PIN that without that PIN they will not allow the device to be transferred. But the main reason that they're able to transfer your device in the first place is most likely because of an email compromise. So if they get into your email, they now have probably a copy of your phone bill, your account number. They can probably find, your social security number somewhere, your home address. There's a lot of information that most people have within emails within their environment, within their email account. So if you secure your email account, then there's going to be a much less chance that they're going to be able to, call and pretend to be you. Also, things like your bill. Don't throw your bill in the garbage because they now have your account number, your address, and there's a lot, people that are savvy are calling in and they're talking to somebody a lot of the time offshore who may or may not care very much. And so if you don't throw your stuff away, shred anything that has any information on it, and secure your email. Use that multi-factor authentication. Use a strong password. Um, So I've got Fiona's asking, what is the best way to jump into the cybersecurity field? Is certification the best way to get hired in the field? So yes and no. So I mean, I got started on a fluke. This was 29 years ago, but in order to your best bet for getting in is initially taking some classes. Make sure you have some aptitude. Make sure you like it. So both CSN and Nevada State College and UNLV here locally have programs. Probably the least expensive way to start would be CSN, and take some classes. You really have to have just a general understanding of computers, the internet, and there's some entry level classes, and if you do well in those, then you go on to the next classes, the CompTIA Security Plus, learning some of the basics about computers in general, A Plus, Network Plus from CompTIA, as well as there's a million different classes. And there's different areas in cybersecurity. There's securing Amazon Web Services, securing Microsoft Azure, securing individual companies, and there's also things like penetration testing. And we do we offer basic penetration testing to prospects and to clients on an as needed basis, which gives us an idea of where their vulnerabilities are. So learning all of those things is really where you start, and then try to potentially get an internship or entry level position. A lot of the times people have to take a step backwards in order to take a step forward. Let's see, we got a few other questions. Someone typing. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to type it in the chat. Little dots are going. I see that little someone's typing. But while we're waiting for that, again, if anybody has any questions, anybody has any needs, anyone has any problems within their environment, feel free to reach out at any time. Let's see. Okay, Muriel asked also, can a cell phone company employee steal your SIM? Is that preventable? Unfortunately, if somebody within, at T-Mobile or at Verizon, is doing illegal things, it's going to be kind of hard. Same thing with the bank. I know someone that had, a couple times had their account, like big transfers from one account to another. And when the bank was asked, how did this happen? Because it wasn't done by any kind of social engineering or log into the account, the bank would absolutely refused to divulge any of that information because most likely that was internal. So internal stuff, it's really not preventable as far as I know. Let's see. I think I think that is it. I don't see any additional questions. Again, thank you for joining. I appreciated having Diego from Las Vegas Heals on. Again, I'm Leo Bletnitsky with Healthy Technology Solutions, and we will see you next time. We're probably going to do another webinar at the end of the month on the Zero Trust, what we were talking about, and we're going to be doing it with one of the Zero Trust vendors we work with. So we'll be sending that out, and everybody have a fantastic rest of your day and rest of your week. Bye-bye.